Welcome, everybody. My name is David Griscom, and you are here with us live for this week's Left Reckoning Griscom stream. Thank you for coming by. Appreciate all of y'all so much. I really like these opportunities to take some time and chat. So feel free to throw in some questions into the chat. We do appreciate super chats very much here. But I try to get to as many of the normal ones as I can, and feel free to sort of jump around too. I don't have a kind of opening subject planned, so that means it's kind of an open book opportunity for folks to talk about all kinds of things, left wing and working class politics here. But yeah, I mean, maybe we can get started with a couple of the ones that we have up at the top. Our good friend, Irlerda, who I'm hoping I finally got it right, and I apologize if I got it wrong, says, David, what is it like being the new senator from Texas? And I must say, it's been pretty nice. And if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, it was a recent interaction of mine with the illustrious senator from the state of Texas, Senator John Cornyn, who is, a very odd guy. He is very much a villain, much like his peer, Ted Cruz. But John Cornyn and Gus Bova over at Texas Observer has actually written some really good pieces on this. He's a very peculiar poster on Twitter, and he's done this a few times where he posts this food. Let me see if I can make this a little bit larger sorry, it's not letting me get it too much bigger than that. But yeah, no, he makes these really there we go. He posts these really disgusting pictures of his food, and he's done this a few times, right? And I think, he's 100% kind of in on it. And I will just say a couple of things. One, it's, I would not be very happy if I went to somebody's house and that's what was served. I will say that, look, while barbecue brisket, smoked brisket is the best, the most traditional Texan, it is 100% okay, in my opinion, for a Texan to make a brisket in the oven. So that's not the thing that's sort of illegal here. It's that brisket looked really fucking nasty. Now, I responded because for my family on Easter, I also put together a little brisket, and I responded saying, I am the senator from Texas now, which people seem to enjoy. And I will say, a little self-criticism, that wasn't even my best, not even one of my best briskets ever. In fact, some of the flat was a little dry, but much better than whatever John Cornyn was having. But I mean, the thing that's really funny to me about this is that, totally, John Cornyn, weird guy. I think it's very odd. This tradition of his now to post really nasty pictures of food on Christmas and on Easter is funny to me, because he seems to very much enjoy the joke. I'm sorry, I just need to switch this around. There we go. But he very much seems to enjoy the joke, and spends the next few days sort of just retweeting people roasting him for his really, really nasty brisket. If you follow him on Twitter, he is actually a very enigmatic poster, and it's not always very clear what it is that he's saying, because he'll sometimes just post an article with a very vague caption over it, and you don't understand, is this his opinion, his position, or anything like that. And in fact, on most of his tweets on other people's briskets, he was just saying things like, people like brisket many different ways, or people are very passionate about brisket. Never a defense of whatever his very weird family tradition is there. But that might be enough on that to start. Let's see what else we have here in the chat. Bill says, shouldn't I move to Philly because I am not a fan of both politics in Ohio and the overall state? I don't know. I think that you shouldn't move anywhere for politics. Just gonna say that. I don't know Ohio or Philly well enough to to tell you what to do here. Next up, from Bill. Um, why can't the left win when it comes to messaging? I mean, that's maybe a good point to sort of put a good question maybe to start um, introducing, some of at least the main themes of, if you could call it a Griscom political thought, is that I think sometimes we have to be very careful about the way that we think about messaging, right? And what do I mean by that? Is that a lot of times, and this is like most of what left media is, or at least what I think a lot of people sort of expect and want from, let's call it like from YouTube, for example. We get this a lot. People sort of would like a video with Matt and I maybe responding to an argument that the right wing is putting out about whatever weird thing that they've concocted this week to sort of do around the culture war or something like that. And, if Matt and I produce a video where we sort of say, hey, this is why this argument is wrong, this is the correct position, people like that because then they can, boom, grab that URL. And if they're, interacting with somebody online or even with a friend or coworker or something like that, maybe like, well, actually, these people have covered this and this is like a good argument for it. So there's a lot of, kind of thought and interest, I think, in left political media, let's call it, in sort of like, how do we frame this or what's the right messaging? And there are winners and losers in that category. You can make a good argument for something. You can make a bad argument for something. You can make a good argument for a bad thing, et cetera, et cetera. So messaging plays a role, right? That's on the individual level, in the level of like debate and discourse and things like that. But when we talk about political messaging, I think sometimes when people sort of ask themselves the question, what messaging does the left need to do in order to win? I think that's where you can start to get yourself into trouble, right? Because there's an assumption in that question of what messaging does the left need to do, that the problem with the left is solely a messaging problem, in the sense of like, oh, we just sort of haven't said the right argument or presented things in a certain way or done in a certain aesthetic. Look, and you can critique the way that the left, talks about these things. I do that a lot, but I think that if you're thinking in your head that like, oh, one of the major hurdles is the messaging, you're making a mistake, because I think one of the more important hurdles when it comes to taking some of the ideas from, let's call it the socialist left, and making them more mainstream, building stronger working class consciousness, political consciousness in this country, is less so about messaging. Because if you think about like the things that socialists want, right? Let's call them the small goals, things like higher wages, higher rates of unionization, Medicare for all that kind of stuff, like the short-term program, all the way to the long-term program. Do you believe in working in workers' democracy? Do you want to have more control over your working life? Do you think that working people should be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor instead of that being appropriated by the bosses? Those are pretty popular ideas, and I think most people have as long as you have kind of a decent ability to communicate ideas, you can get pretty far with somebody on those ideas. Where a lot of people get snagged up, and I think people should take this seriously, is that they don't believe that these things are possible, right? So it's like, yeah, so and so Dave is is a nice guy. He's always talking about these kind of crazy ideas, like workers' democracy and socialism, and us having more of a say over our everyday life. That sounds nice, but I can't imagine any way that that's possible. And it's a very reasonable reaction for somebody to have, because if you lived in America your entire life, particularly our lifetimes, but I'm 30 here, you've just seen things continue to get worse and worse politically, and economically more and more desperate. So why would you believe, hell, wild enough to think that things can get better, getting better in the way that I think most folks on the socialist left are talking about and want to see happen, seems really outlandish. So if you're operating purely on the sense of like, oh, I need to convince people Well, what are you trying to convince them to do, right? And you might not have an answer to that, really. We don't have a moment where there's a kind of political movement where we're sort of lining up behind. I mean, there's significant, important movements for justice around Palestine. But I fear that most of those mobilizations are sort of focused on that task, and understandably and rightfully so. I don't even know if it would be helpful to try to expand those today. But there's not a political, the ground troop organization to join to really fight for this kind of change, right? There's organizations like the DSA and things like that, but that's such a long-term process for people. I mean, you already have to be really committed to ideas like socialism to join an organization like that, to do the thankless work of knocking on doors, organizing, communicating, and recruiting and building political campaigns around candidates in your community. We don't have the machinery, and that I think is the more important question that you should. So if you're somebody who is already, on the side of I believe in working class democracy, I believe in fighting for socialism. The question you really need to be asking yourself is less so what kind of rhetorical tactics can I be employing, and but rather how can we start building the machinery of delivering power to working class people, be it through workplace organizing, political organizing, all that kind of stuff. So that when you say to somebody something that sounds appealing or interesting to them, there's somewhere for them to go, instead of, okay, well, now you two are just are two folks sitting around and agree on something. And again, I'm not trying to be like negative and say that there's no value in having political conversations with folks. I think that's very, very important. But you can spend your entire life in that kind of phase is I guess what I'm saying, right? Where it's like you have some ideas about the world and you start to talk to other people about them, but until you start finding a way to translate that kind of passion and vision into some kind of organized movement, you're going to be sitting around and waiting your entire life for something to change. And I think a lot of people don't have the commitment or the interest in doing that. So a lot of times we get asked questions about how can we frame this, how can we message this, and again, I don't deny that that's important. I think there's bad ways to message things. I think there's good ways to message things. But I would actually ask yourself the second question. The deeper question is, if you convince somebody on one of these things, what is it that you want them to do? Thank you very much, Bill, for that. And I know there's a lot of folks in the chat, people who just joined up. So these are more interactive streams. So feel free to jump into the chat with a question. We do appreciate super chats very much. They do help us keep things going here. But if you're not able to, just please do @Left Reckoning so that I can see it, because sometimes it's harder for me to find questions that are directed at me and not just folks interacting in the chat. Next up is Awesome Possum, who says, and thank you very much for the chat here, says, thoughts on that new Civil War movie coming out? Yeah, I mean, I have a few. The funny, the more lighthearted one is, I know this seems like a very inspirational film for people who haven't seen it, any of the trailers, and I don't know too much about it beyond the trailers. It's a movie about a potential civil war in the near future to present in America. The premise is very funny to me because one of the major forces is, I guess, what's called like the Western forces or something like that, and it's an alliance between Texas and California. Which if there were to be a kind of schism, or anything like that, that would not be how I would sort of write it out. I'm going to wait to see the movie before I have any opinions on it. I know people have been roasting them for that, but actually it is sort of nice, I think, to actually create something that might feel a little implausible in the sense of current day politics, so that we can actually maybe focus more on what I'm hoping the kind of message of the film is that, boy, it'd be a really horrendous thing if you ever saw a dissolution of the Union, and the human consequences of that would be immense. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it, and I love Jesse Plemons, who's one of the main guys in it. We'll see. I think that um, the movie has a very high potential of being really, really bad. But the fact that, at least so far, what I've seen, just on the question of like who's on what side, um, I have a little bit of hope that it might be a little bit more interesting than a kind of like perverse American politics fantasy, where it is the Democrat states versus Republican states, and you get to sort of pick a side like you're at medieval times. And instead of actually looking at the horror of what that kind of conflict would be. But I'm looking forward to seeing it actually. So we'll see. Well, hell yeah. Do I have any questions on Ben Burgess's recent article in Jacobin about the indigenous question and blood and soil nationalism? I'm not exactly sure. Is this the one that Ben? You'll have to forgive me. I did miss a lot of the big pieces that came out in March since I was on honeymoon. So yeah, I think that is something that I know. If this is the one that I think you're talking about, that Ben wrote, and I think Lillian Chicherchi, our friend, wrote a response to. I actually haven't had a chance to read both of those, so I would like to very soon, and do my part of participating in the discourse here. Um, all right, next up is a question from Alex, who says, "What positive outcomes should come out of the World Central Kitchen murders in terms of Israel's sanctions?" I mean, Israel should have been sanctioned a long ass time ago. I mean, um, you know, could or should come out. I mean, this should just be for anyone who's been sitting on the fence. A realization that Israel is a rogue state. Um, has been making it very clear that not only do they not care about Palestinian rights and Palestinian humanity, um, I think that one thing that like our side needs to sort of wrap their head around is the people at the top of the American state. Not all of them, but there are plenty of people who are working to aid and abet the mass slaughter campaign of Palestinians in the United States, who are probably horrified from what they are seeing. The inhumanity actually comes from suppressing that very basic human feeling of seeing the suffering and the murder and the killing and the senselessness of it, and continuing to do your job, right? So what does something like this, what could potentially something like this do? I mean, it might, as I said during the show, Jose Andreas and, a lot of this stuff is like big in DC, and like there might be a fucked up thing where, you know, liberals and people close to the state might not have been moved by their heart, but being moved by their stomach or something like that, right? Because something like this seems closer to them than maybe some of the other aid workers who have been killed or some of the other journalists who have been killed. Not to mention the thousands upon thousands of Palestinians who've been killed. Maybe something around this, like, humanizes it to them a little bit. And we're seeing some examples of that because, this was such a brazen attack. It was very clear that this was, pinpoint accuracy strike, as we showed on Tuesday. It hit right on the logo of the organization. This was on a pre-planned route. I think that what's very likely is that we might get conditioned aid to Israel. But those conditions, or if not even conditioned aid, we might, get some concessions. The Democrats might require concessions from Israel on the way that they're killing Palestinians. And I use that kind of terminology on purpose. Is that I think that what is likely is that you've already seen Chris Coons came out with a kind of statement on this on I believe CNN earlier today. Saying that, oh yeah, it's probably time for us to have some conditioned aid, which is truly amazing to have watched the mass slaughter for the past few months, and see this and be like, all right, actually now it's time. Not the bombing of hospitals, not the mothers looking for their children in rubble, but this, might be the thing that sort of moves these folks because structurally they are incapable with challenging the centrality of support for Israel in the American imperial project, in the social and political project that they've been spent their entire lives working for. I think what's very likely is that we get some form of concessions from Israel, in the sense of Israel says, oh, we're going to change some of our tactics of the way that we are engaging in a mass slaughter campaign against Palestinians. I think that that's what's likely to come out of this. Maybe more of a commitment from Israel to not kill aid workers and journalists, and probably more of a wink and a smile than anything significant. But I think that that's sort of where things are looking at right now. Benjamin says Rhode Island just racked up 15% of for uncommitted this week. Any thoughts about that effort in general? Oh, I think the uncommitted movement is phenomenal. I think that's exactly what folks should be doing. I think it says something actually more to go and to just cast a ballot of dissatisfaction. And I think doing that in as many venues as possible is one of the best things you can be doing when you don't have the opportunity to be voting for anything else. I think that it's been very heartening to see just how many people are willing to do that, especially recognizing that compared to all other ways of sort of having your name on a tally, the uncommitted is the easiest to stay home for, right? Because there's part of you that's like, oh, I'm just not going to vote. But actually going out there and putting that on the rolls, I think does have value. And it's been very inspiring to see. Keep doing it, and all the people who've been doing that work. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Torrential Rage says, sometimes I see Palestinian activists on social media promoting stuff I don't like the Jewish question or 9/11 dancing, Israeli conspiracies, or certain grifters like Candace Owens or certain MAGA communists. While I don't want to focus on this more than the actual genocide going on, I also can't just follow their lead on certain things. Thoughts? I think that's a correct position. I think that it is very important to be able to do two things at once. To be very clear in a message that has been, we've been arguing this for almost my entire adult and certainly my entire life in politics, that, anti-Zionism, being against the belief that the land belongs to a certain ethnic group at the expense of others, is something that is very valid to criticize. And it is not anti-Semitism. Holding that true while also being willing and able and capable of saying no, to anti-Semitism when you see it. Like Jesus Christ, I can't believe we were watching this earlier this week, where you had people legitimately debating whether or not they thought it was appropriate for somebody to graffiti a swastika over a synagogue. Despite who gives a shit that the synagogue, is supporting Israel? That's a very blatant and simple thing to say. Hey, we can do a lot of we can engage in politics and make our dissatisfaction known, and we should do that without engaging and opening up the door for the fascists invoking Nazi symbols. Absolutely ludicrous. And I think that stuff is a very small segment of things that are going on. So I do agree with you in the sense of I think you can focus on that kind of thing in a kind of reactionary way. But yeah, no, you should call that stuff out. And I think, I don't think that it's worth it to sort of say, hey, my number one goal is to sort of comb through the internet or comb through, sort of seek out conversations for this kind of thing, when there is so much else going on. But if you engage with it, if you see it, you should call it out immediately. And I totally agree. And I think that it's a mistake to look the other way at this kind of thing. All right. Well, while we're on brisket overview, which I know I'm like way behind actually, so I might need to go a little bit faster. Again, for folks who have just been joining us, these are like the question and answer streams. I try to take as many questions as I can. We do really appreciate super chats. If you do have a question, at Left Reckoning in there, so it's easier for me to see, or maybe at David or something. I do get lost in the chat later. What's your favorite side dish? I gotta say, man, I really am like a meat. Like if I go to a barbecue place, I'm probably just getting ribs, sausage, and brisket because I want to try them. If it's a place I've been to a bunch and it's more of like, it's not like a fact finding mission or my first time somewhere. Like Mac is obviously the goat, but that's easy. I like beans. I like in a lot of places in Texas have been getting better at this, and I also just think it's because a lot of our good Tejano and Mexican American friends have been having more opportunities to open up barbecue restaurants. But man, a lot of places here in Austin and certainly in San Antonio and stuff, and we'll have the best goddamn tortillas you've ever had in your life. There's a place that I go to a lot, Moreno, that just phenomenal brisket and good ass flour tortilla, homemade, delicious. Joe Snuffy, and thanks for a chat, friend, says, can you guys have someone on to talk about Niger, expound the U.S. military presence there? Complex and enormously significant issue that's undercovered. Yeah, you're right. Actually, doing something on Niger soon would be a good idea. Byron Man, and appreciate hearing from you as always, says, how can the left overcome the Machiavellian nature of our geopolitics? Well, I hate this about the chat sometimes. I'm not exactly sure what it is that you mean. Do you mean the left's politics are Machiavellian or geopolitics are Machiavellian? I mean, I would highly suggest, keeping up with our good friend Danny Bessner's work, when it comes to sort of imagining, what a different version of foreign policy might look like. It's I think one thing that is abundantly clear when it comes to any kind of foreign policy or anything that can be, kind of technical like that, is absolutely critical for left-wing movements. And sometimes I know it sounds really optimistic right now to talk about it like this, to actually be building the capacity to have people who understand these systems be able to work in them in the future. Imagine for a second that out of nowhere we get superstar political candidate who's able to be president of the United States and wins this election. I know, just deal with it for a second. They win. I mean, who staffs the State Department? Not even getting into the other agencies. It's like, do we actually have, how much of a bench do we have of people who have expertise, not just principles and not just commitment to the movement and to the revolution and to all this kind of stuff, but actual like experience and understanding of complex systems like geopolitics. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble, without sort of building up that capacity. And that's one of the reasons why I think like party building is something that's absolutely critical to do on the left. In the real sense of actually having people be members of an organization that is our political movement, so that we can start actually cultivating that talent, right? We're going to want people to be able to staff the agriculture, the Department of Agriculture, the State Department, all that kind of stuff. We need to be able to curate our own, experts, our own people who are able to implement our ideas into policy. And that's not something that we have a deep bench for right now. It was one thing that you saw around Bernie Sanders' campaign. I mean, people were being brought in as advisors who, not all of them. So, hear me out, not everybody, but sometimes you'd scratch your head a little bit. And the realization is it's just like they didn't have people qualified that they could lean on to run those certain advisory positions on the campaign, because we don't have a lot of people working in DC, right? And again, it's kind of catch-22 for, because to get those kind of jobs to work in those kind of industries, you sort of oftentimes have to have loyalty to the machine. But we have to figure out a way to actually build up our capacity to do that, or we will, have the disaster situation where all this years of effort to maybe get ourselves into power and get ourselves into government one day, falls apart because we don't have the ability to staff and carry out the goals of the movement. All right, let's see. I'll make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. People are asking our email. You can send us something at leftreckoning@gmail.com. Let's see, make sure I'm not missing anything. I know I'm way behind y'all. Please keep those questions going. What's my favorite whiskey? I drink. I'm pretty easy to please. Blanton's is the fanciest nice whiskey that I like. I drink Bullet. Balcones, local Texas one's really good too. Colt Dong says, "Would I ever enter a cook-off?" No, I don't think so. Maybe in my next life I can be a barbecue, influencer, but I don't think so. I mean, for me, I get it, and it's a fun pride thing, but I have friends and stuff who do the barbecue competition thing. But I mean, I was talking to a buddy of mine who does stuff, and like the idea of like cooking chicken thighs and having to cut off a bunch of meat off of the sides of it because you need to be a perfect square for the judges instead of just making good food. That just seems like something that not only I wouldn't enjoy, but would probably fail at because I would not be very interested in doing it. Yeah, we'd love to do something with Abby Martin. We're big fans for sure. Are there? I haven't seen anything about who Lumpen Lodge says Lurushite cultists have taken over RFK's campaign as well as Cornel West. Is that true? Let me know who that is. I'm very interested to hear that. If you have any information on that, I haven't seen any of those figures in there. Just saying. Well, thank you very much from the anti-corporatist for the super chat. It does help us out a lot. And thanks for being here. Adam says, I once had some Texas sopping sauce. You mean mop sauce? It was excellent, and the guy would not share his recipe. I don't get that at all. When can I buy some left reckoning sopping sauce? I don't know, man. When I have a big enough kitchen to fill up a bunch of bottles, I'll send you all something. But again, I'm not even a big sauce guy, I must say. I have to look elsewhere. I could do a rub for people if they want that. But I think that's such a scam. Y'all see this stuff. Make me talk a lot of y'all are making me talk a lot of barbecue right now, but you know, I get it. Like sometimes it's nice if you wanted to cook something and you don't want to deal with like measuring out a bunch of different spices and things like that. I've bought rubs from the store before if I know I'm cooking something I don't want to deal with. I just want to season it and cook it. Um, but man, those things are such scams. All those barbecue guys are selling people like $15 little bottles of seasoning, and most of the time it's like black pepper, salt, garlic powder, paprika, maybe a little sugar. I don't know. It's a little too scammy for me. Sorry, my car is shining a light right in my eye, but it's okay. Okay, I'm trying to make sure I'm not. I'm a little bit behind in the chat, so I know there's more. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not missing anybody, so I don't have to go back. Thank you very much, James, for the super chat friend. Do appreciate it. It's another Australian friend too. We got so many. We love our Australian contingent over here at Left Reckoning. Oh, I mean, it's absolutely Elon Musk is, like a lightning rod for anti-Semitism and racism right now. And I'm not somebody who's quick to start throwing those around. I mean, it is pretty wild to see somebody like that. I mean, he was pushing the insane idea that Texas has 1 million illegal voters on the rolls here in Texas. The most ridiculous conspiracy I've ever heard. And it's also like these are the people who you're supposed to be getting into bed with. You're forgetting who it is that is protecting your nasty companies here from serious investigation on environmental workers' rights and community violations. So it is truly something to see him do that, because when he says that there's a big voter fraud issue in the state of Texas, I mean that means he's coming after uh, folks in the Republican Party. Absolutely ludicrous. All right. Oh, here we go with I think some more barbecue chat. We got collards, love collard greens, coleslaw, easy. Put that on the table. Mac and cheese. Yep. No, I don't work for Sam Cedar, and I don't live in New York. So okay, making sure we're not too far down. Naki Cruz, hope I'm saying this right, says, and thank you very much for the super chat, says, I'm wondering how direct action can aid Palestinians. It feels like an impending doomsday scenario come election day. Are activist groups trying to fight for their individualized just causes? How direct action can aid? I mean, I think that some of the most effective things that can be done is to punish the people in power who are making the decisions that they're making, and I think that means concentrating on folks in DC who either benefit directly from. So we're talking weapons manufacturers, those kind of organizations. I know a few comrades of ours have organized attempts to stop production at weapon manufacturing facilities. Right, that's something that if you're talking about direct action to to aid Palestinians, that's something that you can do. I think that making sure that the decision makers are not able to have a quiet moment in public is something that should certainly be done. And I also think that continuing to do the work of showing the dissatisfaction, be it in the media, in social media, things like that, but also importantly, like in the streets by attending, mass actions and marches. That stuff really does matter. One, in sort of registering the public disgust in what's going on. Doing things like voting uncommitted in the elections, I think, is also a very important thing. To make it clear that there is a consequence for it, for what is being supported by those in power right now, and doing whatever is possible, to challenge them. But you can't be starry-eyed about it. The most important thing is actually building up capacity and power to influence those things. So, seeing things like the UAW, the non-auto workers, endorsing a ceasefire, that's important. So if you're in the union, trying to get your union to support a ceasefire. If you're in a city, get your city council to demand this as well. Using all of the levers of power that are available to us, be they state, local, or city, or places in the workplace like unions, student groups, things like that. All these. I know sometimes it can sort of seem small, but continuing to add to the chorus, denying the logic of Washington, of people like Biden, of people like Trump. It is actually incredibly important, and sort of helps us create the conditions to build a movement that can directly challenge the power of those institutions. So, I mean, I think that that's sort of, where you have to be thinking about these things. um, Cult Dog says, what do you think is the likelihood that we'll be able to bring the right over based on labor issues? Well, I don't know what you mean by the right. I mean, politicians, the Republican Party as a whole, not too interested in that. Folks who might vote for a Republican, I think you definitely can win them over on labor issues, and I think it's doing the double work of building up the capacity within our kind of movements and organizations to make them seem like a viable thing. A lot of times, there was so much of for certain kind of voters in the people who voted for Trump, there was a kind of like, oh, we're gonna fuck shit up and we're gonna break things. That's like it's pretty cheap energy in politics, right? It's like it's a mental satisfaction. Oh, this makes them mad, I'm going to make them mad. You can see how it can be, you can see that you can get some traction out of it. I mean, that's, a big part of why Trump was able to win and knock out a lot of the other Republican opponents of his, is because he was able to sort of speak to maybe that kind of like excited energy of, oh, we're going to make the people we don't like really mad. I don't think that's I don't think that's something that, that's a level of political commitment that, any kind of real serious socialist movement, or working class politics, worth its salt should be able to overcome. But you're not going to get it with the kind of way that most leftists talk about workers, which is like, we like workers, we believe in you can't just do it by saying working class a bunch, which is effectively what the vast majority of progressives do. They talk about, oh, we want to do more for working families and for working people. But, just saying it is better than not saying it at all. But again, that's not like a real sustained commitment. And voters and people are pretty smart, and they can sniff out the the lack of commitment that you get from the vast majority of progressives. on this. I mean, progressives have shown themselves have like, I mean, this has been the past decade almost of politics in the U.S. at least. The progressives have just shown themselves time and time again that when push comes to shove, the vast majority of them will turn their back on working people. And I think it's really important for us to build movements that aren't. That are able to stand on their own 2 feet on our kind of politics and on our vision, on our commitment to working class power, in opposition to the power of the bosses, the power of the elites, the power of the scolds and the nags. On that, I think you'll be able to win folks over. I think more importantly, though, than trying to win over any partisan of the Republican or the Democrat Party, is recognizing the fact that the vast majority of working people, their voter affiliation is none, because they don't vote. And I think that if we're actually serious about building political commitments, we need to find ways to sort of activate those folks, along with bringing in people who are supporting those two other parties. But man, I mean, you look at the way that working class voters across this country have begun moving to the right, just in a decade plus. And you will recognize that politics, things are never as set in stone as they may seem. So there should never be any kind of, you need to be confident in politics because things can move very quickly. Is Arun Brown returning? Yeah, we should get him back on sometime soon. I would love to. Need to hit that guy up. Actually, I haven't seen him in a few weeks. All right, let's see. Make sure I'm not missing any. Another question about Ben's land back article. I haven't read it yet, so I will check that out soon. Mike Soy Redword says, "How can I describe communism to newbies reaching out? I know that that's broad, but in general, please." Well, thank you very much for the chat. Let me think. I mean, I think that a fairly effective way to talk um, about socialism or communism is to look to ask them this question. Do you believe in democracy, right? And they'll say yes, hopefully. In the principle of democracy, right? Not whether or not it's working, but in the principle of it. And more likely than not, they're going to say yes to that. And then you say, well, why do we create walls around democracy? And they'll be like, what do you mean walls around democracy? Well, in society, when you're a community, we interact with one another as equals, as people who each have our rights, and are able to talk about what it is that we'd like, are not coerced, or except in extreme circumstances, to do things. Why do we have freedom, right, in public life and private life, but not in work life? Why is it when I go to work, I can be, subjected to all sorts of abuse from the bosses? I do not have the ability to sort of put my own input on the workplace. I am, subjected to a very severe hierarchy of privilege and power. Right, there are people who are above me, and there might be people who are below me, but we do not interact in the same way that we do out in the world and in society. Why is it that uh, we believe in one person, one vote in the rest of society, but at the workplace, we have top down dictatorships? And I think, addressing these things from a question of, democracy, can be an extremely helpful way to start getting people to think differently about things, because, really, socialism, and communism, um, part of the work rhetorically is sort of challenging these notions that we are sort of taught are natural, or real, or just the way that things are, right? So things like property, exploitation, all this kind of stuff, it feels perfectly natural if you sort of only existed under capitalist society, right? You have to do the intellectual work of, questioning, oh, why is it that I'm the one who does all the work and somebody else gets the profit and gives me a wage back, right? Does that make sense? Well, now that I think about it, there's an issue here. All right. And I think that those are the kind of ways to start poking holes in the views that, we're sort of enculturated and we're sort of educated in, early on in America and all across the world. And I think those sometimes are better ways to engage in things than, some of the other ways that folks will, where they'll sort of say like, oh, do you like, should we have, free healthcare and free schools and things like that? Those are great things to, include as well. But I think actually, like, part of the radical work needs to be poking holes into, what we call maybe a capitalist ideology. All right. Maybe we take a couple more. Jules says, regarding the abortion issue, progressives really think Florida might go blue come November. Do you think there's hope for Texas come November? I think that's extremely unlikely. I mean, the Democratic Party, in Texas, and it's more and more so becoming this nationally, which is disastrous, by the way. Um, I mean, what is what is Joe Biden's pitch? What is the Democratic Party's pitch? What is Hillary Clinton's pitch when she was on, on whatever the hell his name is, Jimmy Fallon's show the other day? Did you know that Donald Trump is a really bad guy and the Republicans are really bad guys? And if they're in power, they're going to do really, really bad things. So if you don't want them to do bad things, vote for the Democratic Party. And, you know, fair enough. Republicans are bad, right? You can see the dangers of your political tactic, your political messaging being, look at those other guys. Aren't they really nuts? We're smart. Come and join us. And not doing a kind of positive campaign for things, saying we want this. It's always, we don't want the right to do this, so support us on that. And that's basically been the Democratic Party strategy in Texas for my entire life. And the the Democrats haven't been able to win a statewide election since the mid '90s because of that. That's becoming National Democratic Party strategy, by the way. And I think that's really dangerous. I mean, because once those kind of political cultures shift, and the Republicans continue doing the work that they've been doing, which is getting more support from working people, getting more support from minorities, getting more support from women. The math doesn't work out forever for the Democratic Party if they aren't able to sort of stand strong on certain kinds of victories. So I haven't seen anything here that felt like it was going to change that. I think that you'll have significant turnout in the major cities. They'll go blue like they typically do. But no, I don't think that Texas is in play for Joe Biden right now. dude, this is a powerful order. Anti-corporatist says they're an all meat guy too, and they go to barbecue place and said they just would get the 3-item combo and just have brisket 3 times. So just a big ass plate of brisket. That's pretty impressive, friend. I don't know if this is an inside joke or something, but Spadunda Delat says, can we get John Benjamin on to do a food review of the new Dairy Queen chili cheese dogs? I haven't talked to, yeah, it'd be fun to have, yeah, I'm down. Is this, I get it. It's from Bob's Burgers. Is that what that is? All right. Might take a couple more. Please like and subscribe to this channel. We were about 6 subscribers away from 33,000 here on Left Reckoning before we started. So it'd be really nice if we go over that number. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. And, I never do this, but please like these videos. That's something that, we don't pester folks about, but apparently is very important in making sure that these get recommended to people. Yeah, dude, we're 2 away from 33,000. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. All right, let's see if there's any. Thanks so much, Tom. Really appreciate you hanging out here. Tom says, love these Gab sessions, Dave. Thank you. I know, I really enjoy doing these a lot too. It's always nice, especially having such a fun and chatty audience like we've had today. So appreciate all of y'all so much, and trying to make sure I do these more on a more frequent basis. I know I was sort of busy before the wedding and all of that, so I had to skip a few of these, but I do really like doing them a lot. Mm. Let me see. All right, I'm going to check to see if we've hit 33,000, and then I'm going to make sure that I haven't missed any more. Oh, we hit it. Thank you all so much. I guess I don't know if I'm able to check who that final subscriber was, but it was certainly somebody watching this video live with us right now. So thank you very much for helping us reach yet another milestone here at LR. I know I appreciate it. I'm sure Matt does as well. All right, I'm going to run through these last few questions here. Make sure that folks, get their time in, especially people who've been being patient. Gluty Max, and thank you very much for a super chat, says, do you recommend any specific literature that helps us envision the organization of a post-market, post-state society? I think that a pretty decent, book on looking at this is very accessible, and I would just very much suggest it, would be Anti-Capitalism in the 21st Century by Eric Olin Wright. Somebody who I think, he gets a lot of play, with a lot of writers on the socialist left and thinkers. But in terms of, I think, general audience, people who, like, for example, listen to a lot of left-wing podcasts, maybe even read a lot of the left-wing publications, aren't as familiar with, which is a real shame. So I do highly suggest that book. I think is extremely accessible about thinking of a more scientific and serious way about the need for socialism and how to get there. And our boys here, what are we talking about? What's up, my friend? Aaron Brown's here, best hot dogs in town. I mean, I don't want to get myself into trouble here, but best dog in town. I'm trying to think of a place that I'm not going to all the time. But I do think one of the best dogs in town is at Fraser's Long and Low, which is also one of the best bars in town as well. And we should go there sometime. Thank you so much, everybody. Let me make sure. Oh yeah, no, thank you for. People need to be doing me out a little bit. Mike Soy Breadward reminds everybody support the Patreon. Awesome content. We had a lot of fun this week. We did some Tesla fails along with Matt's deep dive into this. If y'all haven't watched this, actually, before I go, if y'all have not watched this, go and watch this Amazon video that we put out. Amazon scam or something. Matt came up with the title. I really was on the floor with it, but basically the short version is that Amazon has been running these stores where there's no cashier for a while now, and the idea is that, oh, they're using powerful technology. Oh, they can see everything. It's the future. You don't even need to go to talk to somebody and count your money and give them change. Well, it turns out the technology that was allowing them to not have cashiers and allowing you to just grab something off the shelf and walk out was 1,000 Indians who were just watching CCTV to see what people were picking up off of the shelves and then charging them, which is really fucking funny to me. I think people should watch that video and share it with folks, because I really can't believe how audacious it is. It just seems like something I would make up, or like a child would come up with. But no, it was a major international corporation, using things called sensor vision, was one of them. Sensor vision, deep algorithm learning. Of course, you just have to throw that in there. That's like the salt. That's like the salt and pepper. You know what I mean? It goes on everything. And I'm forgetting the other one. Oh, something called computer vision, which I guess is true if they're watching CCTV. And then sensor fusion. So put all those together, and 1,000 Indians, and you have a working concept there. But folks, I appreciate all of y'all so much. If I missed anybody, I am really sorry. But appreciate all of y'all so much. I'm happy to be back hanging out with y'all. And yeah, friends, see you soon. And we'll be back this Sunday with an episode for patrons, patreon.com/leftreckoning. Thanks again for getting us to 33,000 YouTube subscribers right now. I really appreciate all of that. And see you soon, friends.